the only purpose you have is to live your life as fully and as passionately as you can. The purpose of life is to live out the passions that you were born in this life with.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Building Men podcast. Become the strongest version of yourself mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. As I talk through mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically, I haven't done a deep dive into the spiritual part of Building Men. And it's been a lot of it has been about, our mindset. I've done a lot about, physical fitness, things like that. I haven't done a ton about spirituality. And it was something I'm really interested in, especially recently on this journey that I'm going on in Building Men. So my guest today, he is an expert, I would dare say, in the area of spirituality, meditation, breath work. He is a spiritual guide. He is a yoga expert. He's a motivational speaker. He's one of the chillest motherfuckers I've ever met. And it's funny, as I was getting ready to, to start the podcast today, I said, how do I pronounce your name? I was butchering it. I was saying it like the Americanized version. So it's Salvatore Liberti.
That's it.
Because I said Salvatore Liberti. I said it in a really white ass way. And he said, well, I go by Salva sometimes. And so welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate you being here, my man.
Man, thank you. And I appreciate the effort into the name and pronouncing the name. That's another level of respect and honor. So yeah.
Much respect to you. And before we got on, you said, well, it's the Italian way. You have to kind of really over enunciate. And I mentioned, I actually have an interesting story about my last name. My last name is Meralda, and it's been butchered over the years. My great grandfather, his name was Giuseppe Meraldi, Moraldi, Meraldi. He was a silent movie actor in Italy at the turn of the century, from the 1800s to the 1900s, as silent movies were. And I guess he got in trouble with somebody in a high spot in the mob, and he was on the run. I think he dated someone's girlfriend or wife or something, and he's on the run. And so he changed his last name from Meraldi to Meraldo.
Oh.
Right? And so he changes his name and he's trying to hide out and this and that. So now my grandfather is born Nicholas Meraldo. He's in the United States. He's driving a car with my grandmother at the time. Little does he know that he has epilepsy. He gets into a car crash, and they say, you can't drive a car. You cannot. You have epilepsy. You can have a seizure at any time. We're taking your driver's license away. Well, I guess the Meraldos knew mafia members in the United States and Jersey at the time, and so he got a new birth certificate and a new driver's license, and he switched the O and the A in the last name from Meraldo to Meralda. So my last name went from Meraldi to Meraldo to Meralda. And that's my story. So tell us a little bit about, so your last name, where your heritage, where do you come from?
So, well, thank you for that awesome story. It's a great mafioso running away story. And my name is actually interesting. I looked it up a few years ago to try to understand what the etymology was behind it, because my last name is Liberti, right? It's like liberty, but with an I at the end instead of Y. And that word is actually Latin. It's a Latin word, but it doesn't mean freedom as you might think it would. It means something very specific, actually. I looked this up, and for your listeners might look it up for me again, and I might be wrong, but this is the gist of what I got, was that in ancient Rome, you had these slaves that the Romans would make them fight as gladiators, right? You've all seen the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe, and he's taken from Africa somewhere and made into a slave. And they have an opportunity to earn their freedom through those battles, through killing, through coming out on top. And when those gladiators earn their freedom, or when those slaves earn their freedom, they took on the last name Liberti, which literally means like free person, like someone who's earned their freedom. And then the lineage goes that they move north, right? Because north is where the farmlands are, north of Rome, the Tuscany and Torino and Milan. This is where like it's a little bit more quiet, and there's a little bit more prosperity and abundance to be had there. And that's where my ancestors settled originally, but I've actually traced my DNA back to Spain and Portugal. And so it looks like they brought my ancestors over to Rome, to Italy from there as slaves, and then they earned their freedom. And that's where my grandfather actually comes from. And my grandfather fought in World War II, and after the war, he was a rebel against Mussolini in Italy. He took a ship all the way to Peru, and that's where he met my grandmother and had my dad. And here I am today, Salvatore Liberti, Peruvian Italian, now living in the U.S.
Isn't it amazing the stories that we can find out? And right now through Ancestry and 23andMe, you get this understanding of who you are, why you are the way you are, the building blocks that created it. It's fascinating to me that many of us have these histories that we had no idea existed. I just found this out about my last name, Salva, I want to say like 2 or 3 months ago. I found this out about my last name, and I never knew it before. My parents were, especially my father, was very, I don't want to say secretive, but he didn't know a lot about his heritage, his lineage. His parents were very secretive, and we never heard stories growing up. And just recently I was like, Dad, come on the podcast. I want to ask you questions about everything that happened. It was really interesting to me. Some of it was really enlightening. Some of it was really funny. Some of it was really, really sad, finding out a lot about my family's history. But it helps you understand who you are and where you're going and things like that. It's a really interesting, dynamic, understanding a lot about your family. So I do appreciate you taking on that little journey. So now you are, did you grow up you're out on the West Coast, you're in LA right now. Did you grow up in that area?
No, I actually I've been living here for about 1.5 years. I moved to the US with my whole family as an immigrant family when I was about 9 years old. And so we moved to Miami. I grew up in Miami, Boca Raton, went to college there. And funny enough, I kind of want to bring back the name thing because I feel like it's really cool and important to understand this, that growing up and even up until recently, like I would look at my name and I see this name and I see Salvatore, right? And it means savior. Salvador in Spanish is savior. And this is just the Italian version. And so my name almost meaning like savior of free people, of freedom. And that always kind of stuck out to me and almost like scared me in a way, as it instilled like this higher meaning to my life, this sense of responsibility and purpose, that why was I named this, and does this carry a responsibility, some sort of burden on it? And for the longest time, I thought that was some sort of purpose and calling that I had in life, which is really interesting because that's a lot of pressure to put on a kid.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to have you kind of weave us on a journey, and to get to this point, I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to put my cards in the middle of the table right now, or put my chips in the middle of the table. Let's talk about purpose, Em. The first time that I met you was a few months back. We were introduced through the Kevin Bacon of, the motivational world, Austin Linney. And Austin introduced us together. We got onto a Zoom call and we talked for about an hour. And I was fascinated with you on Austin's podcast. You were on the Construct Your Life podcast, and something you said stuck out to me. And when we met for the first time, I said, talk to me about this, because I feel like I had it wrong. And I've been talking to the Building Men audience, and I had it wrong for such a long time. And I said, you need to figure out what your purpose is in life and go towards that. Find your purpose and move in, full force forward towards your purpose. But you said something on the Construct Your Life podcast that made me take a step back and really consider it. Getting ready for this interview today, I thought, let me go back and check out what you're doing on Instagram and do a deep dive into your life and your world. And one, just the way you communicated is in such a calming, meditative way. Just your hello, beautiful people of Earth. It's so good to see it. It just makes you feel calm, and it's a really beautiful thing that you do there. But you talked in one of the reels about the movie Soul. So talk to us a little bit about what your idea is, you took what number 22 from the movie, and you could explain it a little bit better than I am. Number 22 did in the movie, and why what I was saying, you need to find your purpose in life and move towards that purpose, was not the right thing I should have been saying to my audience.
Well, I love that you're asking about that, because that was one of my favorite realizations that I had recently, because this concept of purpose is so pervasive throughout the personal development world, the personal growth world. And what happens is, and this happened to me, I went to over a dozen Tony Robbins events as a volunteer crew member, and seeing all these amazing people level up and finding happiness and finding joy and getting excited about their lives and creating this life by design. And often you get in those rooms, Tony goes, what's your purpose? Because there's a point in the program somewhere that they make you write your purpose on a piece of paper on this notebook. And the person will stand up and say, my purpose is to alleviate suffering by leveraging technology and applying whatever, right? Some convoluted, impressive sounding thing that the person next to them is like, oh man, like that purpose sounds really fucking good. Like I better work
I'll have
on my
what
purpose.
He's having. I'll have what he's
right,
having.
Right. Like mine doesn't sound as good as that one. Man, is that guy better than me? So the ego comes in there and takes over and says, I have some sort of greater purpose to serve humanity because I am special. That's the first pitfall, is thinking that you are special or outside of the rest of anybody, right? And that you are somehow separate from the collective. I mean, we truly are part of one planet, one species, one umbrella. And this notion that you have to have some sort of purpose that's greater and outside yourself is this self-defeating cycle, because you'll never get there. You'll never be fully satisfied with some sort of higher purpose. And you may get there, but when you get there, it might not be what you realize, because ultimately that is just a validation of the ego, something to make you feel special, right? And when you start talking about that movie Soul, I went to watch the movie with really low expectations, like no expectations of what it could be. I just saw the movie was called Soul. I saw that it involved jazz, and I was like, I'm in. I love jazz. I love deep Disney Pixar films that make you think. And so started the movie. And in this movie, in Soul, there's this concept when the main character Joe dies, and he goes to like this in limbo place, this astral body world in which all these little souls are getting ready to head down to earth, and they're finding their little sparks, right? They got these badges on their chest and they've got sparks. And a spark is just another word for passion. Right? What are these little souls passionate about? Some of them are passionate about piano. The other one's passionate about cooking. The other one is passionate about arguing. So might be destined to become a lawyer. And all of these little souls are finding these passions. And when they get them, then they drop down to earth. Now this number 22, she's struggling. She doesn't know what she's passionate about. She can't find something she's good at. And she feels on a very deep level, but she doesn't share this with anybody at first, that she's not good enough to get to earth, right? Because she needs to have some sort of purpose and passion in life to get to earth, to actually be able to live it. And so in this state of insecurity, she just puts other people down, and she becomes this difficult person to deal with. Lo and behold, throughout the movie, you go throughout this journey where 22 does get to earth and does get to live life and experience the minuscule details that give life this juicy, vivid experience, right? The brush of the wind in your face, the leaves falling off a tree, the taste of something hitting your tongue and exploding with flavor and sensations that you can't even imagine, and that in the spirit world didn't exist, right? These experiences didn't exist. It was just consciousness. And 22 slowly begins to realize that life really might be about living in these little moments, living in this present appreciation for the creations that are around you, for the manifestations that are around you. And at that point in the movies, when things started to slowly click for me, I started to open my eyes, And towards the end of the movie, if for your listeners who have seen it or haven't, I would suggest you, very highly suggest you do. Towards the end of the movie, there's this entity called Jerry, and Jerry is essentially the universe, God, the ether personified into a concept that our thinking minds can comprehend. And they even say it in the movie, as I'm manifesting right now as this drawing so that you can comprehend what I am. But really, I'm not this. I am pervasive awareness. I am everything that is and was and ever will be, which is it's kind of a big topic to tackle, but they do it in such a beautiful way. And this character gets around to saying, responding to one of the other characters talking about, well, what if my life has no purpose? And they say, well, you humans are so silly and so funny with your sense of purpose. You think that something is out there greater for you to achieve, where purpose is really just one. And this is actually, I went back and looked up where these ideas come from and some of the people who had spoken about this before, because it wasn't Disney Pixar the first ones who talked about this. And one person who I found was Alan Watts. Alan Watts, if you're familiar with him, he was an author in the early 20th century and was really one of the first intellectuals in the West to blend East and West philosophy together into what we know as almost Wattsianism, if you will. And Alan Watts has this quote where he says, well, this the simple, I'm butchering the quote, I'm paraphrasing it, but the simple meaning of life and the purpose, the sole purpose of life is just to simply live it. The idea that you have to achieve something greater or outside yourself to validate who you are is just ego. And so that's when it all clicked. There is no greater purpose that you have to serve. The only purpose you have is to live your life as fully and as passionately as you can. The purpose of life is to live out the passions that you were born in this life with, right? Dennis, you're a passionate communicator and a passionate father and a coach and someone who shares this work, and being on your show and seeing how energized you are by interviewing me, by interviewing your other guests, and by creating this movement that is building men. That just the sole act of doing that, that's you living your life and living your passions, and how fulfilling is that, right? And so if we can begin to understand that all we have to do is follow our passions, whether that is helping people, whether that is racing cars, whether that's painting, whatever it may be, as long as you're following those passions, you're living life to its fullest. It's energizing you, and that's all you have to do. That's literally all you have to do. Right. You don't know anybody anything. You don't need any kind of external validation. And sure, if you want to help people, that can be a passion, and you go on and do that and allow it to bring you energy. But we have one purpose as a humanity, as a consciousness, and that is to witness, to live this creation that we've manifested, because these are all our creations. Everything around you, Dennis, is your creation. You've brought this to life. And so why not enjoy the manifestations that you've created? Because ultimately it may just all be an illusion. Who knows?
Salva, what an unbelievably profound point. And the idea that if you are thinking that your purpose is this higher calling in whatever way, shape, or form, and you climb this mountain and you get to the top of this mountain and you realize, I'm on the wrong mountain right now. This is not where I belong. And if you're basing everything around that, it makes so much more sense when you put it in the way. Your purpose is to live, to wake up in the morning and breathe the air and appreciate what we have here in front of us. This unbelievable thing that is the world that we live in right now. And that is our purpose, to experience that in every way we possibly can. And then these little badges that we have on, because those passions, those sparks, they'll change. When I was 16 years old, I thought I was going to play baseball for the New York Yankees. That was a spark that I had. I thought it was my purpose at the time, that I was going to be a pitcher for the Yankees. There were times where my spark, I thought, was going to be a superintendent for a school district and be in charge of 50,000 kids in a school district. I'm glad that I never thought of that as my purpose either, because as I shifted my life in different directions, I realized that was not what it was about for me. I needed it to be about something different, those sparks for me. You also mentioned just fully appreciating every moment. Every day you wake up that ends with a Y, you need to fully live your best day on that day and appreciate all these things that you have in front of you. So I would ask, Salva, how would you describe your sparks, your passions? What are the things that would be those little bright badges on your chest?
Wow. Well, I would start simple. First of all, uh, the ocean and surfing, for example, that is something that I could spend hours doing. And it's something that's just for me. I go out all the time alone. I live 15 minutes from the beach here in Venice Beach, California. And whenever I get a spare 2 hours, I'm like, oh, let me just head out there and just sit in the water and catch a few waves. And that's something that brings me presence. It energizes me. It clears my mind. It's good for my mental health. Another one of those passions is music. I love to sing and I love to listen to music and be in that. And whenever I can be at a live show, whenever I can be in a space where I'm appreciating music, playing an instrument, singing with friends, it's such a rich moment. And I'm passionate about seeing people liberated and living a life that they love and feel fully expressed in, which sparks my work as a guide, sparks my work as a coach, as a teacher. And I say teacher very intentionally because I'm not here to be anybody's guru, right? Like Tony Robbins has a movie called I'm Not Your Guru. And I've heard this from teachers before, that the world doesn't need another Ram Dass. He was already here. The world doesn't need another Dalai Lama, another Buddha. The world needs you to be you and just fully express yourself and live that and embody it. And what that does is someone like you, Dennis, sees me and says, what's that guy having? Because he seems so chill, so appreciative of the moment and so in love with life. I want what he's having. And then I teach you and I empower you to have that perspective and have that mindset. And then you can go teach someone else. And it becomes this effect of spreading it just by being it. Because if I stand up and talk and I tell you, and I try to motivate everybody to start meditating every day and to do plant medicine and to do breathwork and yoga and all this stuff, then people are gonna be like, well, you're just telling me what I should do. You should do this, you should do that. You end up shitting all over everybody.
Right,
and
exactly.
nobody wants to be told what to do. So why not just live my best life, go on my journey, and the people that resonate with me can come along and learn from me. But the key here is to empower them. I don't want you to come to me every time you have a problem, you have a question. Like I want you to learn the answers so that you have them for yourself. Because ultimately, I can't feel what you're feeling. I can't see what you're seeing. I haven't been through what you've been through. You have. So you're your own best healer. You don't need me. You have all the tools. You already know. I just have to remind you.
As a teacher and a coach, Salva, that especially as a former educator, principal, coach, your way of explaining that resonated with me, in that you're not going to take someone from, point A to point Z. They have to kind of go along the process. They have to go through those bumps and bruises, fail a little bit, understand, have that cognitive dissonance that happens to learn, and then to take another step forward. It's almost like you mentioned in one of your Instagram posts around what you're doing is you're not teaching someone how to go from standing to riding a bike down a hill. They need to have those training wheels on. You have to have the training wheels on, and you have to ride with someone for a little bit, and they're holding onto the back, and then it goes for a little bit with just you and the training wheels until you're able to take the training wheels off. So say I'm this average, 44-year-old dude who's never done yoga, who really just started in meditation. How would you go about walking me through a journey into helping me become my best self, knowing that right now I haven't even gotten on the bike yet? How would you kind of coach me through this process if I was just this guy who's like, hey, I don't know much about yoga, I don't know a ton about meditation? Where would you start with me?
Sure. I love this question, Dennis, because I've been asked this before, and it forced me to really to think and feel into what the intention of what that looks like, right? Someone who comes in out of the blue and says, okay, I submit, I'm a student, which by the way, I'm also a student. I'm not at point Z. I might be along like point SRTQ, whatever. But as someone that's an A, I can help them get to where I am or beyond. But the first step in this methodology that I've developed, which is the HEAL process, which is almost an acronym. The first part is healing, understanding where the energetic blocks are, what beliefs are not serving who you are, what trauma is still being carried along and is affecting you in your everyday life, exactly how those patterns are manifesting based on that trauma, and going in and understanding it mentally, cognitively, and then doing the energetic work, the meditative work to release that trauma in order to lighten the load, to clear the energy, because we have a capacity for energy and space holding. And when we're holding on to so much, we don't have any space to let anything else in, right? It's like holding on to an old relationship that it's over, but you just haven't moved on. Of course, you're not going to find anybody else because you're still holding that space energetically. And so it's about clearing house, clearing all the gunk out. And there's always going to be more that comes up, but getting really deep and vulnerable with someone in order to understand what their pain is. Because big part of the human experience is suffering. So what are you suffering about? And how can we help you move beyond that, let go of those stories? Because at the end of the day, they're just stories, right? They're just stories that we hang on to, and everybody's got a story. So transcending the stories. And once that happens, which can take, one session, we can take months, depending on what that person's experience and how willing they are to let it go. Because some people, they want to just hang on to stuff, and that's okay. They're not ready to let go of it. That's okay. But once that happens, then you can go into a bit of an engineering phase. And that's part 2 of the process, in which you start engineering your habits, your practices, in order to serve you best and to fine tune the person who you do want to be and how you want to show up. And then there's a different process, but ultimately it gets you to a place, and it's unique for every single person. And it's not a linear process in which you hit these checkpoints and you're good, right? It's almost like riding a wave or riding a roller coaster. One day you feel like the most enlightened motherfucker on the planet and nothing can touch you. And then something does touch you and you drop right back down to victim level. And so there's these levels of consciousness that we move up and down on: level 1, level 2, level 1 being life happens to me, right? Full on victim consciousness. I have no idea that I have any choice about this, but ultimately everything is a choice. Up until level 4, which is, like we mentioned before, that Mother Teresa, Dalai Lama, Buddha, like untouchable, like they are unconditional love forever and always. That's just who they are. And we fluctuate between all of them. One day might be a 3, one day might be a 2. One day I might, not me, but someone might get fired from their job, their relationship ended, their dog died, and they feel like the worst victim in the world. They're back to level 1. It's okay. That's part of the journey.
And so much of it is the stories that we tell ourselves and the language that we use in our brains as we're talking to ourselves. We can do so much good in that way. We can also do so much damage. Our biggest critics it's the words that we're telling ourselves in our brain that you use the word serve, that they're not serving us. I want to get back into habits a little bit. I'm interested in, you mentioned after the healing, there's that engineering phase where you get into these daily habits. But you also mentioned trauma, which in my career, I work with educators around social emotional learning. And when you're working with kids, you have to understand that a trauma that someone experiences, as they're going through elementary, middle, and high school, it has a way of kind of hanging on as an adult, and it manifests itself physiologically as an adult, especially when a child experiences more than one trauma. And it can be like really pervasive. If they're called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, when children experience 2, 3, 4 of them growing up, that can really have a major impact on their health, on the way that they show up in relationships, in school, their grades, their attendance, their behaviors in school. So when you recognize that someone has a trauma in their life that they're holding on to, you mentioned that they're holding on to it. They're next to you, you're on your surfboard, you're trying to help them, and they're holding on to an anchor. And you're like, hey, the only way you're going to swim is if you let go of that. How do you help people that are hanging on to these traumas? What's the secret ingredient, if there is one, to help people that are dealing with traumas?
I love that question. And there really is no secret ingredient. There are states in which people can be more highly suggestible and more adept at working through and processing trauma. Because why trauma is scary is because there's a perceived pain behind that event, and accessing it is almost like being afraid of death. Like it's almost, you're so scared of reliving that pain because you remember it so vividly, though. It's so important to actually revisit that, because the healing happens and I am not nearly enough of an expert on quantum mechanics or quantum physics to talk about this, but in the way that I've been taught this and explained it, and the way that I practice it, is that this trauma lives in the past, yet it holds an energetic charge today. And in order for us to be able to heal that, we have to go back to that past. And in my work, I take someone through a closed eye process in which it's almost half meditation, half hypnosis, in which we go through a process of breathing to calm the prefrontal cortex, the conscious mind, in order to then access the subconscious mind. When we do that, we take someone through a visualization process in which we bring them right back to that experience, and then change the experience on a fundamental level, right? Speak to that inner child, and then change the words that happen there, and change the understanding and the beliefs that come from that experience. And when that happens, there is an emotional release of energy, right? There's a processing that goes through where that unfelt grief, that unfelt guilt or shame or fear or tragedy is then opened back up. You experience it all fully, and there can be a lot of crying and screaming and laughing or whatever may happen. And then the charge is over, because an emotion is simply energy in motion in the body. And when something comes up and we repress it, it's like an energetic charge that never went, that never got out of your body. And so all we have to do is kind of open that lid up and then let it flow in a safe container where you feel safe enough to do so, where you're not afraid of it. And when that happens, there's a freedom at the end. There's like a satisfying sense of release, that then you can move on without that baggage. Like you're literally cutting off a piece of baggage. Like if you were a hot air balloon getting dragged down by all these sandbags, and you're like, why am I not going any higher? Like, dude, you got a lot of sandbags going on. You got to start clipping some of those.
I'll go back in the ocean with you here. You're next to this person, you're on your surfboard, and they're holding on to this anchor. What you're showing them is the only way that they're going to be able to truly let go of the anchor is, one, they need to get up on the surfboard with you. They still have it there. So now they're going on this journey with you. They know that they have the love and support of another human being with them to dive deep into that experience, understand that this anchor doesn't need to be with them anymore. And they're finally able, once they go through it, they can drop the anchor off of the surfboard, and then you two can ride a wave in together. But that's what you almost have to go through, that process. And my advice to teachers, especially when they know children have experienced more than one of these adverse childhood experiences, it's about the relationship. They have to know that there is someone there in a supportive way that is not judging them, that's helping them process, but showing them that unconditional love and not judging them for it. So it's a beautiful answer to that. And I'll wrap it to another, I'm pretty sure it's a Disney Pixar movie, is Inside Out. And
yes.
It's that idea of how emotions play such a role in the way that we show up. And there's these core memories that we have, and they might be really, really positive memories that we had that just have stuck with us our entire lives. Conversely, they can be these really negative, traumatic memories that we have, and you're helping people go through that experience, go through that memory, and almost rewrite it for themselves. So
well, there's this interesting concept, Dennis, that I took to in my preparation and in my studies for being able to help people, and just my sheer passionate curiosity about how the human psyche works and why we suffer and why we act the way we do, I wanted to study everything, right? So, because I went into first Tony Robbins. Okay, cool. Tony Robbins does this. Okay, what does Wayne Dyer do? What does T. Harv Eker do? What about Alan Watts? Some of these older guys, Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill. And so I'm just trying to bring in all these different modalities and all these different ideas. And actually, when I moved out to LA, I found myself in a Scientology seminar. I was like, what the hell am I doing here? And first of all, Scientology gets a really bad rap for being a cult, which it is. But ultimately, we're all in cults. Tony Robbins has the people that follow him, they're their own cults. And the people who follow Gary Vee and Grant Cardone, they're their own cult. They just don't want to, say they are, but we're all in cults. But a concept that I learned in those Scientology seminars, I'm not a Scientologist. I don't identify with any of it. I stopped answering their calls a long time ago. They're very persistent. But it's something that actually Tony then kind of took and stole from Scientology, because this is a very good concept. And this is a concept of flattening. The concept of, if you've ever been around Scientology, you understand that there's these meters that they use with these metal tins that they make you hold, right? And these meters measure your emotional reactivity. Like each emotion and each charge and thought carries an electric charge that passes through this current. And so part of like the Scientology therapy is having you revisit really traumatic memories. And when you do, that needle is going to go off. But they make you revisit it over and over and over again, sometimes 10 times in like a 4-hour session. And they make you describe every single detail you can about how you felt, about what the sky looked like, what you were wearing, what the temperature was, what you were smelling. So much repeating of that same traumatic experience. The goal is that needle never moves. That's the goal, to flatten the experience so that there's no emotional charge left. You're almost going over it over and over again. And that concept, similarly, Tony applies in his seminars when he does interventions, and I apply it in my practice, in which we're going through traumatic experiences, and we got to keep going through it and keep going through it and keep feeling that sadness, keep feeling that grief, keep feeling that trauma, until you can visit it and objectively say, that doesn't charge me anymore. I processed it completely. And so that is super important, and a big part of the work about, you have to move through it. No matter how scary it is, no matter how traumatic it is, the only way to let it go is to move through it and then take that bag and just drop that bad boy. A great book for that I'd recommend is Letting Go by Dr. David R. Hawkins. In the intro, he goes on this tangent, and he goes, I don't care how much yoga, breathwork, acupuncture, massage, plant medicine, and he just lists off a list of like 50 different things that people do, right? Very LA lists, cacao ceremonies or whatever, right? None of those can give you the healing and the satisfaction that letting go will.
And it's diving deep into that emotional experience. I started to go down a rabbit hole of Inside Out. I don't know why I got onto this Disney Pixar animated film idea, but those emotions, the sadness, the happiness, the fear, the anger, we need to fully go through them, experience them, instead of repressing them. For such a long time in my life, I would push down things about myself and emotions and feelings that I felt didn't look a certain way if you were viewing me from the outside. So if something didn't quite fit into the box where I was living, that I felt, okay, I'm a principal, I live here, this is my family, this is what my dog looks like. If something didn't jive with that, I would just push it down, because that wasn't who I wanted to show the world who I was. And what happens is that you put it into a soda bottle and you shake it up, and it's going to explode in a way that's not an appropriate way or an appropriate time. So it's understanding those emotions, fully feeling into them, and being vulnerable enough to say, listen, it's okay. Sometimes I get really fucking angry. Sometimes I'm elated. Sometimes I'm really sad, and it's okay that I cry when I'm really sad. And that's not meaning that I'm less of a man because I do so. So it's fully embracing that experience. And I love that you went there. I love that you said, you fully have to go through it and then be able to let it go if you really want to move on and be the best you that you can possibly be.
Absolutely. We must become masters of our mind and masters of our emotions. And realize that they don't control us. They are not more powerful than us, and we're not our emotions. Sometimes people can say, I am angry. No, 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 no. You feel angry, but you're not the emotion of anger. And that's where you talked about earlier, how language is so powerful. Language truly is power, and language shapes our reality. It casts spells on us. When people say, oh, my anxiety was really bad yesterday. Yours? When did you buy anxiety?
Right.
You own it? Like, you feel it, but it's not really yours. And so when that disidentification happens, then you can start to increase the space in which you can work, right? Like, okay, maybe it's not my anxiety. Maybe it's the anxiety that I feel. Oh, there's a disidentification with it. I'm not the anxiety. I can start working it out. And there's a beautiful process to be had there. And people will tell you everything that's going on in their minds. Our language patterns reflect almost all of our subconscious beliefs. And you just have to listen to someone. All you got to do is listen. They'll tell you what they believe.
And I think a lot of people, the language that they're using is that victim mentality, that victim mindset. They're either talking in a very passive way where, and I just did a deep dive into language with a gentleman named Mark England, who I would love to put you in touch with if you don't know him yet. He does a program called Procabulary, and he talks about a couple different things. One is the victim mindset when we're speaking, when we're saying, my boss is such an asshole. He didn't give me a promotion. I'll never rise in the company because of him. So you're putting something that you're experiencing onto another person. She broke my heart. I'll never be the same without her. She is, and it's again putting whatever your romantic relationship is, and you're putting that onto someone else. Or passive talk, soft talk, which is saying, maybe I'll go to the gym tomorrow. I'd like to start a business one day. Perhaps I'll go to the... So it's taking it and not being really sure and confident in the words you're using, and it's very vague and nebulous in how a lot of people are communicating. It's understanding what you should own when you're speaking, and then how to speak in a very strong, solid way, confident where people will understand a little bit more about who you are in that capacity. So that victim mindset is such a huge part of it. You will absolutely love this guy Mark England. I'll connect you with him, because you're speaking the same language in a little different dialects of the same language, I would say.
Surely. And most of us who are in this work, we're just regurgitating what we've learned at this point, because there's really no new knowledge. This is all wisdom. This is all stuff that's been lost in the commodification, in the fetishization of hard work and grinding and hustle and personal development. Because, well, ultimately, that's, you talk about the rat race, right? People read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad and the rat race and just being stuck in that little hamster wheel. Well, when you go into personal development without that level of awareness, that presence, then it just becomes another hamster wheel. It just becomes another, what's the next event I can go to? What's the next thing I can heal? What's the next thing I can learn? But the fact that you're still seeking something outside yourself to make you feel a certain way or to validate who you are is indicative that you still haven't found that key core piece that is, you are it. Excuse me. You are enough already as it is. And you are spirit. You are consciousness having a human experience. And that's all you need. And I love that you talk about that victim mentality, because that's level one of the levels of consciousness, right? Being a victim to your circumstances, the notion that life happens to me. Level two, you start breaking out of that. Life happens for me. Oh, maybe the reason why I didn't get this promotion is because, life might have something better for me along the way, or another opportunity might be coming up, and you start making lessons out of life. Then you get to level three, which is life happens through me. That's when you start manifesting and start calling things into your life, and you're like, ooh, now I feel like I'm really powerful. I feel like Neo in the Matrix, right? Say, I know Kung Fu, I learned Kung Fu.
Where the bullets are coming at you, and you can just kind of pick it up and drop it to the floor, because that's not going to go through you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting dynamic when you start to realize that roads that you didn't have the opportunity to take, or maybe that a road was shut down or closed at some point in your life where you're looking at it thinking, oh, I wish this would have happened to me, or I wish that would have happened to me. I spent a lot of time there, Salva, in a victim mentality where things weren't happening in the way that I thought they were going to happen in the time that I expected them to happen. Where initially in my career as an educator and as an administrator, I found success. A job I went for, I got it. A job I went for, I got it. And I just had this, I was just blessed with things. Then as doors were closing and I was shoved on this path, I went through this woe is me thing. What happened? And it was other people and I was blaming and it was really unhealthy. But now as I look back, every single door that closed, that was closed for a reason. I was not intended to go through that door, because on that other side of that door was the same me that I was. It was that same muted, person who was worried about what other people thought of him for such a long time, was living in a victim mentality and mindset, was blaming other people, and wasn't truly learning and experiencing life. I wasn't waking up with the purpose of living. I wasn't doing that for such a long time. So every one of those doors was closed to lead me to the door that opened up to where I am right now. And I'm talking to you about these existential topics and spirituality in a way that I never envisioned myself having this conversation. And so I'm truly blessed to be talking to you about all of these things today. So
it's an honor, man. It really is. A teacher of mine, actually a shaman from Colombia, he says, you got to be grateful for the good and the bad that happened in your life, either way. Because it's like stepping into a hole on the ground. If you're angry at that hole and you're just like, oh, stupid hole, like, why was it there? And you're going to keep walking, you're going to step into another one. But if you're appreciative, you're like, oh, thank you for being there. So I can be more mindful of where I walk. Then you're probably not going to step into the next one because you learned that lesson. And so by being grateful for the good and the bad, you get to learn the lessons and you don't have to relive those over and over again, because the universe is going to keep teaching you the same one, keep smacking you across the head with that same lesson until you learn it. We've all been there. Yep.
And if you've only had filet mignon, it's great. You have to have a White Castle burger every once in a while to truly appreciate the flavor of filet mignon. It's just, you have to go through that wrap burger experience at some point in your life. So you know what? There's a time and a place for this, but I could now go for a filet mignon. You don't want to live
absolutely. But then there's the power of training, right? Your lowest low today might have been your highest high 10 years ago, and that's cool. That's awesome. That means you're progressing, and as Uncle Tony Robbins likes to say, progress equals happiness.
He also, one of his big things is change your story, change your life. Once you stop living in that story that you're telling yourself for such a long time, you can rewrite it in your brain. And once you rewrite it, now you're not holding the anchor next to the surfboard. You're riding a wave. It's what you tell yourself.
And you're in the present, right? You can't be in the past when you're riding a wave, because you'll fall. And so everything that happened all the way up to you into the present. And now you also have to be wary. You have to be aware of not looking too far into the future and not worrying about that. And so often when we stay in our thinking minds into our conscious prefrontal cortex, we're either thinking about everything in the past that we still haven't let go of, that's holding us back, or if we have let go of that, we're thinking about everything in the future that could happen, that won't happen, that will happen, and we start to get anxious about it. That's where anxiety comes from living too much in the future. And Uncle Tony Robbins has one of my favorite quotes of all time. It says, the quality of your life is directly correlated with the amount of uncertainty that you can comfortably deal with.
The quality of your life is directly correlated with the amount of uncertainty you can deal with.
Yep.
I love that.
Because the next minute is uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen. And if you can comfortably let that go and say, yeah, I don't know what the next 50 years are going to look like, then the quality of your life improves because you're not worrying about it, right?
You're being present. You're being in that moment.
In the present. That's all there is. We're eternal prisoners of the present, Dennis. We can't get out.
Right. And then we might be able to fully appreciate those moments, like you mentioned before. You can fully appreciate being in the purpose, which is living. wind on your face, the sun in your eyes, listening to the birds chirp, whatever it is, you're able to fully embrace that when you're not in a depressive state, worrying about things that happen to you that you cannot control, or worrying about something that may or may not happen in the future. And typically human nature is we build them up into something that's way worse than could or would ever happen. And when we're spending precious time thinking about it, time, it's such the precious thing. The older I get, the more I realize that I want to suck the life out of every single moment that I have on this planet. I want to fully appreciate every single moment because it is so finite, and I want to like be there in those moments. So to spend the last hour bullshitting with you, I fully appreciated this experience talking to you. I need to continue this conversation in a couple months, just because I think we just barely scratched the surface on, you know, the conversation that could possibly be out there between the two of us. I fully appreciate the way that you communicate, and I can't believe that it's been an hour since you've been on this podcast.
That was a lot of fun, going really fast. And I will say it's easier said than done to truly live in the present, to let go of the past, to stop worrying about the future and start living in the present. It takes practice.
It does.
And one has to be devoted to the practice. And interestingly so, we've gotten to a point in our human experience, which we're so identified with the thinking mind as the higher power on the planet, right? You have scientists and people who pound the book of science saying, if this is not science, it's not real, right? Science is not truth. Science is a way of getting to the truth, a way of circling around it and getting a pretty good idea of what it is, but it's not truth. And so science, created by the mind, has almost taken its own pedestal and put itself on a pedestal. And then you're like, but what's really going on? Because there's a certain pervasive anxiety, there's a certain pervasive insanity in this world. And the way that I have found that's worked for me to break out of that is, well, you can either go meditate in the Himalayas for 20 years and find that separation, or you can take a bit of a shortcut and dive into the world of plant medicine. These medicines, which were put here on earth by whatever higher power you believe in, to connect us with that. The wisdom of the shamans is so that they believe that the world's gone insane. And the cause of this insanity is our disconnect from spirit. And by taking these medicines, such as psilocybin mushrooms, or ayahuasca, or combo San Pedro, these medicines that are from the ground, that are from living plants, there's a reemergence of your soul with the spirit of great spirits, the one spirit, the one universe, the one consciousness. And when we get re-immersed with that, the healing begins to happen, and the understanding begins that there is only presence, and that we are one with each other, and we're one with the planet. And so that creates all kinds of domino effects for environmental consciousness, for nutritional consciousness, for just being a better friend, being a better person, not judging, and recognizing that everybody that you meet is a reflection of yourself. Everybody that you meet is God in drag, there to teach you something. So who are you to judge someone else and condemn them?
Exactly, yeah. And when we as we meet people and as we go through different experiences, we see them as we think they see us as well. There's that looking glass self, that portion that we go through in life, right? Where I know as myself, I went through this period where I thought about how other people thought about me. You go through this spot where you need to get to the point where you're just going to fully embrace that moment and fully appreciate, I'm here with another human being. They might be a reflection of me, but let me be fully present in this spot, enjoying a conversation with another human being in this exact moment. It's a deep dive, and it's something I mentioned before as we were speaking before we started recording. It's not something that I had ever done before. I haven't gone down that journey myself yet, so I don't have a lot of knowledge or information about it. I would love to learn more, because you do better when you know better. And I during the journey of building men, I've tried to learn as much as I can about as much as I can. It's there's so much out there to learn about, and I'm not closed off to anything. I want to really fully experience it and learn as much as I can. So I would love to pick your brain about that some more, because
Always, man. Anytime. And the important thing here is that it resonates with you, because I can be talking out of my ass and going on a bunch of different podcasts and saying this stuff. It may not be true, but the mere fact that you're here and there's a spark in your eye when I say these things, and there's a part of your soul says, yes, that's true. I know that. It's because it's wisdom. It's forgotten wisdom. I'm just here to remind you and your listeners and myself of all these very simple concepts. Life is not that complicated. We're making it so. Our ego likes to make it so. Our mind likes to make it so. And to be able to discern and separate ourselves from that mind, that's the journey. The longest journey we'll take, right, is to go from our heads to our hearts.
It is. It's 2 feet, but it's the longest 2 feet in the history of the world, right there.
Well, shorter for me. I'm probably not as tall as you.
I'm 6'4". It's a bit of a longer journey.
I'm 5'6" on a good day, so I got a shorter journey.
Listen, you could blow dry the hair. You could do like an 80s thing. I remember in the 80s, that was a thing. The hairband guys, look at like Bon Jovi. He could have been 5'8", but he was 6'2". With the hair.
I have to bring that back.
Next time on, maybe you do a little, little hairspray, blow dryer. We'll see. That'll be a good journey.
I love it.
I'll do some ayahuasca. You do the hairspray and the blow dryer.
Oh man, yeah, it's such powerful medicines. And the last thing I'll say is these medicines, they've really been a shortcut, because it's a jolt. It's a rapid experience of what it's like to be separate from your mind, to disidentify from the mind, from the ego, and to truly realize who you are. And that is spirit. That's light. That's who you are. You're consciousness, loving, pervasive awareness, eternal awareness. The mind is just the computer that your body has. That's it. That's all it is, but it thinks it's you.
And here's the thing. Who is anyone to judge someone who experiments with plant-based medicines that help us get in touch with our true spirit sense without being fully embrace it or understand it or experience it themselves? Yet those same people will go out and pound a 30-pack of Miller Lite, smoke a joint, and get in the car and drive home. And those same people will judge someone who is, maybe it's outside of the box, in their box in some way. And that's why I would say, it's
not their fault. It's a lot of it's the government's fault and the propaganda that was around. I studied propaganda in college, and I was like, wow, the Nazis were really good at this. But you know who was even better? Americans.
We can do level 2, could be plant-based medicine. Then we could do another podcast just about the government propaganda and what we're seeing on the news and how that's so. I haven't watched the new Salva it's been a year pretty much, unless somebody says you need to put this on right now. I haven't turned on the news, because I'm able to function as a human in society without watching ABC nightly news. I'm okay with not doing that, and I feel so much healthier by not doing that as as Yeah,
absolutely, because you can have existential conversations instead of just talking about stuff that happened. Remember, when's the lowest form of conversation?
It reminds me of Chris Farley on Saturday Night Live when he's interviewing Paul McCartney, and yeah, that was. Maybe I'll put that into like a little clip of that, because it made me laugh there. So the way I would end, Salva, is let us know how we can get in touch with you. How can people find this spiritual guide, this breathwork meditative expert who has this enlightened way about him? How can we find you? How can we get in touch with you?
First of all, thank you. I fully receive that, and I would submit to you that I'm simply a reflection of you, back to you. But you can find me. The best way to find me is on Instagram at salva.live. That's also my website, www.salva.live. You can find my meditations. I host free online Zoom meditation classes twice a week. And I'm also doing retreats all over the world. We're going to Bali in September. We're planning a couple more retreats with different groups. I'm there as a teacher, and I'm part of a larger collective for different ones. So that's a great way to get in contact. Or, just reach out to me if you have questions. I'm always open to chat with anybody who's curious about this stuff, because this is what's really helped me, and has been the missing piece. This spirituality, presence, meditation world was the missing piece in a massive world of personal development, which I went through. I started at 17 years old, and by 23, I felt like I'd read every important book and been to every seminar, or at least been to a seminar that distills something from another seminar. And I was like, okay, what the heck is it? I'm still not happy. I'm still not fulfilled. What's going on?
Salvatore Liberti, the savior of the free people, loosely translated from his origin story. Thank you so much for being on here. Building Men podcast. Go a step further than you thought you could go today. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time on Building Men.